This is going to be another lesson in how to use Gravit Designer to create some cool isometric shapes. We're going to start off this time by creating some round shapes, and we'll do some shape building to create some pretty neat effects. Alright, so usually when you're using a designer like this, and you're trying to create isometric shapes, there are two methods of creating isometric shapes. One is to align them to a grid, to draw them on the grid, and the other one is to use what's called the Ssr method. Ssr stands for scale, shear, and rotate. So let's look at that. I'm going to get my ellipse tool here, E on the keyboard, hold down shift and just create a little circle here. Doesn't matter how big it is, it'll snap to the grid if you have the grid activated here. I'm going to go over here to my transform button, which we just we'll click on this little window here, this little panel over this way. And I'm going to make sure everything is set to normal. So I got 0, 0, 100, 100, and 0 for the rest here. I'm going to go over here to my height, and I'm going to click on height, and I'm going to change the height to this exact value, 86.602. 86.602%. It's going to be that exactly. I don't know why. This is the math. Anyways, press apply, and then bring this back to 100. Once we're done with that, we're going to skew it or shear it, depending on which program you're using here. And I'm going to shear this negative 30 degrees along the x-axis. Then I'll press apply. And then finally, what I'll do is I'll bring this back to 0, and I'll rotate it 30 degrees. Not negative 30 degrees, positive 30 degrees. Press apply, and boom. So when we look at this now, we see the bounding box around this square, and it looks around this ellipse here, and it looks pretty normal. But if I were to sort of click inside, it would suddenly create this little isometric sort of plane here. If you get in really close, you can see it's sort of hanging out and sort of lined up along that isometric grid. I can actually maneuver these points to line up exactly with this isometric plane here. So I can hold down shift and just sort of move this out and sort of match it up to that plane. And that's handy if you want to do this. Gravit actually has a really cool feature here, though. If I were to say, for instance, use my pen tool just to create a simple diamond shape, as if like an isometric sort of square here, and create these 4 points. Let's make sure they're all lined up. It looks about right. And I'll hit D on the keyboard to select these 4 anchor points. I'll just use my corner tool, and it creates basically that same shape. I think they're just about the same. I don't really see much of a difference here. With Adobe Illustrator, if you try that, it'll just create a perfect circle. So it's not quite the same option, which is kind of neat that Gravit does a couple things that Adobe Illustrator doesn't really do. Okay, so I'm going to turn the grid off for now. And I'm going to grab this ellipse here, and I'm just going to go over here to my color fill. I'll just change it to a different color, say for instance blue. I might just pull this up a little bit towards the lightness side, because I want this to be my lightest color. I'm going to hold down the Alt key and drag this down. It's going to create a copy, and if you hold down Shift at the same time, it's going to keep it lined up. So I'll just pull it down, say for instance 100 pixels, and now we have basically the top and the bottom. If we're going to create the sides, what we want to do is we want to get our rectangle tools. Let's get our R on the keyboard, get a rectangle tool. This should snap to the edge. The reason why we turn the grid off is because we have that grid on. These little curved areas don't actually touch the grid. The little bounding box corners do. And so this is going to help us snap to the actual rectangle instead of confusing ourselves and snapping to the grid. So I'll just pull this straight down. It should snap right there. And it should let you know when you've reached the center of the bottom part of the cylinder here. Move tool selected, or selection tool selected. I'll just grab both of the bottom and the vertical edges here. I'll go over here to my shape builder tools. I'll just make sure union is selected, and I'll just press that. And it's going to create this compound shape. It's going to be easier to change the fill if we right click on this and convert it to a path. With that done, I'll just go over here to my top of my little ellipse up here, hold down Control and Shift and up, and I'll just click back onto my bottom of my cylinder here. I'm going to change this, the fill over here from color fill to linear gradient. And you can kind of see where this is going. We have our first stop here on our gradient. I'm just going to pull that down slightly just to make it a little bit, distinguish it a little bit from the from the top there. I'm going to click on the other stop. You can either click here or you can click up here. I'm going to sort of sample the same color and sort of pull it down a little bit further. So we have sort of a light side and a dark side. So it goes light, lightest, a little bit darker there. So deselecting all that, you can kind of see we've got the smooth looking cylinder here. Obviously, creating like the sort of uniform color is one option. If you look around, you'll see this design being used all over the place, and you'll see a variety of color options being used. I'm going to select both of these. Let's do some neat little shape building sort of experiments. I'm going to keep the grid off for now. I'm going to hold down Shift and Alt to just drag this over here. I'm going to click on the body, the sort of vertical edges here, hit D on the keyboard for my direct select tool, my sub-select tool, hold down Shift while I grab these anchor points, and just drag these straight down, holding down Shift in order to keep it constrained to go straight down. I'll grab this guy, and I'll just sort of pull him straight down as well, and it should let me know as soon as it's matched up to the middle there. There we go. Let's take a look, see. Okay, not quite. Here we go. That looks about right. There you go. Cool. All right, so let's create a sort of a donut shape, ring shape here. We're gonna have basically like some vertical edges and a sort of void on the inside. So I'm gonna grab this top shape here, Control C, Control V. I'm gonna change this color to, say, for instance, orange. And I'm just gonna grab this, and I should be able to simply hold down Shift and Alt, and it will keep that constrained to the right size, and it'll sort of drag it in. I'll just drag it in, say, for instance, about right there. And that'll give us the sort of what will eventually become the void that this goes down. I can grab my grid on for just a second, deselect everything. You'll be able to see your document settings, and I'll click on Isometric. And let's look right here. It looks we've got like maybe 2 plus a little bit left over. So if I see I have just a little bit left over here, I'm going to hold down Alt and drag this shape down. And what we'll do here is I'll change this to blue, and I want to make a copy of this. I'll say Control C, Control V. I'll make a copy of that. I'm going to hold down the Shift key, grab my blue shape as well, and I'm just going to intersect these together. So we have this sort of outline of where they overlapped. I'll hold on this, right-click on this and convert this to a path. This will help us later when it comes to our shape building. So I need 2 of these. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go to actually, I'll probably need 3 of these. I'll Control C, Control V, and I'll change this to red. And then I'll grab this one more time, Control V, and I'll change this to green. And so now you can kind of see where this is going to wind up. This is the sort of inner walls. This is the sort of void here. I'm going to grab this green shape, hold down Shift, and grab my top of my sort of ellipse here, my cylinder. Go down to Subtract, and we have this compound shape hanging out. That's pretty cool. So we have the hole punched out of this compound shape. I'm going to right-click on this, and I'm going to convert this to a path, because otherwise it's going to, I'm going to be grabbing parts of the compound shape here. So when I do that, once that's converted to a path, I can freely select this ellipse, hold down Shift, and grab the sort of uprights of our cylinder, go back up to my shape builders, and hit Subtract. So now we've got this hanging out here. If you can't see, we've got this orange shape. I'll just change this to a different color, say for instance, red. The last thing we'll do is we'll need to punch this shape here out of this red ellipse right here. So I'm going to grab my ellipse. I'm going to right-click on it real quick and make sure I've converted this to a path. This will help us with our shape building. I'm going to click on this right here, hold down Shift, grab this red shape here, get my Subtract, and subtract that. So now we've got this compound shape. Right-click on this, convert it to a path, and we're good. Okay, so let's just grab this shape here, and I'm just going to go over here to my color fill, change it to a linear gradient, and let's see if we can just sample these same colors here. So my first stop, I'll just click over here on the edge of this circle, and then over here on this stop, oops, just grab this, oops. Okay, I'll click on this stop here, grab my eyedropper tool, and click on the darker side of the blue. So now you can see we have a gradient going from like a light side to a dark side over here, and a light side to a dark side over here. It should be reversed though, because if you think about where the light's coming from, it's not really coming from this side. This would make sense for this to be dark, because this is facing the light. So I'll go over here to my gradient here, and I'll just reverse it. And so now you can kind of see we've got the light coming in. It's blocked from inside the ring over here, and then we have it showing up over this way. So that makes a little more sense. All right, so there we go. We have 2 cool shapes here. I'm going to take one more shape. This is going to be pretty simple. Let me just grab my cylinder here. I'm just going to pull this down over this way, and what we'll do is we'll shrink it down a good deal. Let me get rid of my grid for just a second. So just grab these two. Hold down Shift and shrink this down. And then hit D on the keyboard for your direct select tool. And I'm just going to select the top here. And I'm just going to drag this upwards. And hold down Shift while I do it. Let's create this sort of longer sort of pole here. I'll shrink this down a little bit more. So be sort of skinny, as it were. And I'll just change this shape here to be more brown. So I'll get my first stop, and I'll click over here to orange, and I'll find sort of a brown shape, brown shade over this way. Then I'll click over here, do the same thing, hit my orange, and just sort of grab the sort of brownish shade over there, darker brown. And what we'll do now is we'll create an ellipse, so E on the keyboard. I'm going to center it right over here. Hold down Alt and Shift just to create this sort of a circle. Might just sort of raise it up some. And I'm going to create basically, it could be like a tree if you were to like think in terms of like, low graphics days. I'm going to go to my fill. I'm going to change it from color fill to radial gradient, and I'll change one stop over here to a light green, and then the other stop over here to a darker green. So you can kind of see what we've got going on here. The light in the middle and the dark on the edges gives it this semblance of sort of 3D, and it still fits inside this isometric sort of plane here. What we'll do to kind of make it fit more within this environment where we have the light side on one side and the dark side on the other instead of right here in the middle, we'll click on our little swatch here on our gradient, and let's hover over this blue line here until we see these little crosshairs. I'll just drag this slightly over this way. Can I give the idea that this is hanging out more towards this side? And if you wanted to, say, for instance, pull this out a little bit to give it more of a gradual change, that would be good right there. So there we go. We got our little isometric shapes here. So these are some fun little round shapes that fit well within the same environment as your isometric cubes. And cool. Yeah, awesome. Well, cannot wait to see you guys produce. Keep on designing.